Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be completely underestimated, only to reveal a talent so extraordinary it leaves everyone speechless? If you've ever been overlooked or judged by appearances, this story will resonate deep in your soul. Before we dive in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that will warm your heart and restore your faith in humanity. Marco Alvarez wiped the sweat from his brow as he pushed his cleaning cart down the hallway of Meridian International, one of the most prestigious translation agencies in the city. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his tired face. At 42, his hands were calloused from years of manual labor, his shoulders slightly stooped from carrying the weight of raising 3 children alone after his wife's passing 5 years ago. "Excuse me," a sharp voice called out. "There's a spill in the conference room that needs immediate attention." Marco nodded respectfully at Vanessa Keller, the impeccably dressed executive director who barely glanced his way as she continued typing on her phone. He'd been cleaning these offices for 8 months now, invisible to most of the employees who walked these halls in designer suits, speaking in polished tones about global contracts and international diplomacy. Little did they know that before tragedy struck his family, Marco had been a linguistics professor at the University of Barcelona, fluent in Spanish, Catalan, Portuguese, Italian, French, English, German, and Russian. His academic career had been promising until his wife's illness drained their savings and forced him to abandon everything to care for her and their children. Now, he worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. During the day, he cleaned offices. At night, he drove for a rideshare company. Sleep was a luxury he could rarely afford. As Marco entered the conference room, he immediately noticed the tension in the air. Around the large mahogany table sat Vanessa, the CEO Richard Thornton, and 12 interpreters, all looking frustrated and exhausted. On a video screen, an elderly man spoke rapidly in what Marco recognized as a specific dialect of Russian. "This is unacceptable," Richard was saying, his voice tight with anger. "We've brought in our top Russian interpreters, and none of you can understand what he's saying? The Petrov contract is worth millions, and we're losing it because we can't communicate with the man?" "Sir," one of the interpreters explained, "he's speaking a very obscure Siberian dialect with elements of other regional languages mixed in. It's not standard Russian." Marco quietly began cleaning the coffee spill at the far end of the table, trying to be invisible as always. But as he listened to the elderly Russian man speak, something stirred within him. He recognized the dialect. It was one he had studied during his doctoral research on linguistic evolution in isolated communities. The Russian man was becoming increasingly agitated, and Marco could see the million-dollar deal slipping away. Before he could stop himself, he spoke. "He says the contract terms disrespect his family's heritage," Marco said quietly in perfect English. "The land you want to develop has been in his family for 7 generations, and he needs assurance that the cultural landmarks will be preserved." The room fell silent. 12 pairs of eyes turned to stare at the cleaning man in the worn uniform. "What did you just say?" Vanessa asked, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised in disbelief. Marco swallowed hard, immediately regretting his impulsive decision. "I'm sorry for interrupting. I just—" "No, please," Richard interrupted, suddenly interested. "You understand what he's saying?" Marco nodded hesitantly. "Yes, sir. It's a dialect from the Sakha Republic. I studied it years ago." Richard exchanged a glance with Vanessa, then gestured to an empty chair. "Sit down, please. Can you translate for us?" For the next hour, Marco facilitated a conversation that saved the Petrov contract. He translated with precision and cultural sensitivity, explaining nuances that the other interpreters had missed. By the end of the call, Mr. Petrov was smiling, and Richard was looking at Marco with newfound respect. "Where did you learn to speak like that?" Richard asked when the call ended. Marco hesitated, then decided to tell the truth. "I was a linguistics professor before life took a different turn." "A professor? And now you're cleaning our offices?" Vanessa's tone had shifted from dismissive to confused. Marco explained his story, his wife's illness, the mounting medical bills, the choice between his career and his family. As he spoke, he saw the executive's expressions change from surprise to something resembling shame. "I don't need pity," Marco said firmly. "My children are healthy, we have a roof over our heads, and I maintain my dignity through honest work. That's what matters." Richard leaned forward. "What if I offered you a position here? We clearly need someone with your skills." Marco's heart raced. A proper job in his field would mean regular hours, better pay, health insurance for his kids. But doubt crept in. "It's been years since I worked professionally as a linguist. And I have no formal credentials here in this country. You just saved a multi-million-dollar contract when 12 of our best interpreters couldn't," Richard pointed out. "I'd say that's credential enough." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Marco was hired as a special linguistic consultant, with flexible hours that allowed him to be there for his children. His first project was to train the other interpreters in regional dialects, sharing knowledge he had accumulated through years of academic research and personal passion. Not everyone welcomed him with open arms. Some of the interpreters, particularly Thomas, the department head who had been with the company for 15 years, resented this former janitor suddenly becoming their peer. The whispers in the break room didn't escape Marco's notice. "He got lucky with one dialect," Thomas muttered to colleagues. "Let's see how he handles real professional translation work." The opportunity came sooner than expected. A delegation from the European Union arrived for negotiations on a complex trade agreement involving multiple countries. The meeting required simultaneous translation in 6 languages, with technical, legal and economic terminology. Thomas assigned Marco to the most difficult position, clearly expecting him to fail. Instead, Marco flowed effortlessly between languages, capturing subtle diplomatic nuances that others missed. By the end of the day, the EU representatives were specifically requesting the new translator for their future meetings. As months passed, Marco's reputation grew. Clients requested him by name, and his salary increased accordingly. He was able to move his family to a safer neighborhood, enroll his children in better schools, and even start a small savings account, something that had seemed impossible just a year before. But success brought complications. Vanessa, who had once barely acknowledged his existence, now found excuses to visit his office, leaning too close when they reviewed documents together. "We should discuss this translation over dinner," she suggested one evening, her hand lingering on his arm. "I know a lovely French restaurant downtown." Marco gently removed her hand. "I'm sorry, but I need to get home to my children." Vanessa's smile tightened. "You know, Marco, networking is important in this industry. I could help your career advance much faster." "Thank you, but I prefer to advance based on my work," he replied politely but firmly. The next day, Marco found himself assigned to menial translation tasks, while important clients were directed to other interpreters. When a major project came in requiring his specific expertise, Vanessa claimed he was too busy to take it on. Marco struggled with how to handle the situation. He needed this job for his family, but he wouldn't compromise his principles. The stress began to affect his work and his health. His 13-year-old daughter, Sophia, noticed his exhaustion one evening as he helped with her homework. "Dad, what's wrong? You seem sad." Marco forced a smile. "Just tired, Mija. Nothing to worry about." Sophia, wise beyond her years, wasn't fooled. "You always told us to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Are you doing that, Dad?" Her innocent question struck him deeply. What example was he setting for his children by allowing this situation to continue? The next morning, Marco requested a meeting with Richard. With steady resolve, he explained the situation with Vanessa, careful to stick to facts rather than accusations. Richard listened carefully, his expression grave. "These are serious concerns, Marco. I appreciate your professionalism in bringing this to me directly. I'll look into it immediately. An investigation revealed that Vanessa had a history of similar behavior that had been covered up due to her family connections to the board. When confronted with evidence, she resigned rather than face termination. In a surprising turn of events, Richard offered Marco her position as Director of Specialized Translation Services. We need someone with both linguistic skills and integrity, he explained. You've demonstrated both. Marco's first act as director was to implement a mentorship program for promising linguists from disadvantaged backgrounds. He remembered his own struggles and wanted to create opportunities for others with talent but without traditional pathways to success. 1 year after he had entered the conference room as a janitor, Marco stood at a podium accepting an industry award for Meridian International's innovative approach to cultural and linguistic inclusion in business translation. Language is the bridge between worlds, he told the audience. But too often, we only build these bridges for those who already have access to power and privilege. True communication means hearing all voices, especially those that have been silenced or ignored. In the front row, his 3 children watched with pride as their father received a standing ovation. Sophia, now 14, had tears in her eyes. Beside them sat Richard, who had become not just a boss but a friend and supporter of Marco's vision. Later that evening, as Marco tucked his youngest child into bed, his son asked, "Dad, are you happy now?" Marco thought about the question carefully. The past year had brought financial security and professional recognition, but those weren't the sources of his happiness. "Yes," he answered truthfully. "I'm happy because I stayed true to myself, even when it was difficult. And because I have you 3 in my life." As he turned out the light, Marco reflected on his journey. From professor to janitor to director, the path had been neither straight nor easy. But each step, even the painful ones, had led him here, to a place where he could use his gifts to their fullest while maintaining his dignity and integrity. His story wasn't just about linguistic talent or professional success. It was about resilience in the face of tragedy, about maintaining dignity when the world tried to strip it away, and about the courage to speak truth even when your voice shakes. And perhaps most importantly, it was about being seen, truly seen, for who you are, not for the uniform you wear or the job title you hold. If Marco's story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Remember that extraordinary talents often hide in plain sight, and sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones we've trained ourselves not to hear. Share this video to remind someone that their worth isn't determined by their circumstances, and that authentic character always shines through in the end.